your studies go well, and that you'll return home all fired up by the Australian way of life and all aspects of Australia. Take back Australian rules football with you. And those of you that are in Melbourne, Perth and Adelaide anyway. And I wish you all the best for your studies here. I've been doing quite a bit of work actually since 2006 for AusAID in Africa, Rwanda, Kenya, Mozambique, South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, and also in Indonesia. There's plenty of my friends from Indonesia here today, including in Aceh province. It's great to visit there and see the reconstruction of the city of Banda Aceh following the devastation of the tsunami. Cambodia, Malaysia, and it's certainly been, from my point of view, a very enriching experience to visit those countries and to engage with the people there, all of whom have studied in Australia and then gone back to their home country. I want to talk to you today about leadership. I do so from a background in politics. 20 years in the state parliament, 3 years as a minister, and 5 years as the Premier of Western Australia. And I think politics can help in any discussion of leadership. Why is that? Because when you're in politics, there are three aspects of the human experience that are very, very important. And they're all crucial for leadership. The first one is power. How to gain it and keep it. The second one is about managing. How to create and sustain an organisation. And I hope everyone in this room, at some point, will have the honour and privilege of running an organisation. Might be a country, might be a Department of State, might be a non-government, might be a private sector organisation. And thirdly, why are we in the business? To do things, to create results on the basis of policies. So politics is all about policy, it's all about power, it's all about management. And when you think about it, that's what leadership needs to be about. In order to lead, you must be in a position to lead. In order to keep that leadership going, you need to be able to manage things. And you've got that leadership in order to do things and make changes in the world. So my topic today is quite simple. How can you be an effective leader in an accountable society? We all live in accountable societies. Accountability now is much more profound and intense than it's ever been in human history. Why? Because modern technology has linked everyone up. It's very hard to hide things in a world in which there's such connection. So I'm not just interested in leadership. I'm interested in effective leadership in an accountable society. What do I mean by effective? Leadership that's sustainable and leadership that achieves results. It's sustainable and it achieves results. Now, notice there's a connection between those two. Because if you want results, you need time. I mean, one of the great and most, I think, depressing characteristics of the modern society is our general lack of patience. Because we get things so quickly, we think things can happen quicker than they actually can. If you want to change the world, to improve your society, it takes time. So you need leadership that can be sustained over time. So it's effective leadership I'm interested in. Not just leadership, effective leadership, and it's effective leadership in an accountable society. One in which there is responsibility for the community and the institution. The community, of course, has expectations, laws, within your own organisation. Many of you will be subject to performance management. So I'm not just interested in leadership. I want you to be effective leaders. I want you to sustain your leadership. to get that leadership to produce results, and I want all of that to happen in an accountable society. And a lot of the literature on leadership, I think, is a little bit abstract. It doesn't focus enough on the context of the leadership. Now, you all know accountability today, as I said, is much more profound than it's ever been in human history. So to be a leader, you've got to deal with that accountability. Isn't that magnificent? Do you want to see all that again? Sustainable power and influence, plus results, plus accountability, is effective leadership. Sustainable power and influence that produces results in an accountable society. Some people produce results, but they're not accountable. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why they may not have sustainable leadership. Or they need them to sustain their leadership with fear and intimidation rather than through consensus and accountability. So that's my formula. Let's have a quick look at these issues. Number one, without any question, if you want to be a leader of the organisation, you have to know yourself. How do you cope with stress? Do you listen? A lot of people listen, but they don't listen. Oh yes, I'm listening to you, but it's not getting in here. You're not actually hearing what they're saying. You might hear the words, but you mightn't hear the soul and the heart that's behind the words. Listening means listening. Can you influence others? Can you negotiate outcomes? What's your moral compass? How far are you willing to go? This means listening and learning. Humility before hubris. Know yourself. Think about yourself. Talk to others. Have a mentor. Find out what your capacities are. Because if you're not comfortable in a leadership position, I'm pretty certain I can say that you're not going to exercise that leadership effectively. And not everyone's a leader, remember. Not everyone's a leader. You know, as they used to say, you know, all of the managers and the generals, they all lead their troops as well. Not everyone's going to be a leader. So understand yourself. That's my first point I want to make. And interestingly, many of you come from cultures that take this much more seriously than our Western culture. Western culture has tended to assume we can just make ourselves, and that there's not a psychological, an emotional, even a genetic makeup in here that's having an impact on all of this. And so we need self-awareness. Very, very important. Mr. Drucker, well-known management theorist, says we've got to know your strengths, you've got to know your weaknesses. A good leader will understand their weaknesses as well as their strengths. A good leader won't be frightened of having a strong and capable person with them. It's a weak leader that wants to have yes men around him. No one is perfect. Well, there might be one or two that are perfect. I haven't yet met anyone that's perfect. So all of us need to add to our strengths advice from others in areas where we have weaknesses. So, you want to be a leader. You've got to understand yourself. Second thing, you've got to understand the organisation you're working in. How does it work? What does it do? And why does it do it? What, how, and why? How? You've got people, you've got dollars, you've got a culture within that organisation, you've got a management structure, and then, of course, on top of all of that, you've got, or with all of that, you've got a technology. Understand your organisation. How's it working? Second thing, you've got to know what you're doing. You're producing services to the community. You may be in the defence forces or a regulatory system. You might be in the KPK in Indonesia. That's an interesting job. You might be IT expert supporting government, or you might be a policy person. Organisations do all of these things. If you want to lead that organisation, you've got to know what it is that it's doing. But the most important question of all, why are you doing it? What outcomes are you seeking? If you're in the public sector, you've got to deal with the needs of citizens. You're in the private sector, you're producing goods and services for customers, clients. Always remember, a good leader will focus on the outcomes being sought. That's why we have organisations. Yes, they have inputs, as they say, and yes, they have outputs. But the purpose of that is to achieve something. Leaders focus on the reason for the existence of these organisations. They just don't accept what is there now. They're saying, why are we doing these things? And they're trying to improve it all of the time. And remember, you've got to deal with how people feel about what you're doing, as well as how you're affecting the world around you. Do we have medical practitioners in the room? There are many, many treatments that you can give somebody that might solve their problem, but they're very unhappy and they feel as though that's not the sort of treatment they want. They want alternative forms of treatment. And you know as doctors now that you have to talk to people about the way they feel about things as well as what things can do for them. Sometimes, tragically, in medical science and serious illness, there's no choice. But there's always more choice than we can imagine in many, many areas. Next question. What is the political situation of your organisation? What's its image? What's its credibility? What's its reputation? Do you have alignments and alliances? What assets do you have in this organisation that you've got and that you're running? What information do you have about your political situation? I've seen some very, very good people achieve very little. And that worries me. Because you know what that means? Some not so good people are given an easy ride. I want the good people to win. I want the good people to be political. You know, there are a lot of good people out there, and they say, I'm good, I'm not into politics. And I don't mean party politics. I mean the politics within organisations. And they lose. And the bad people win. You've got to be political. You've got to understand your situation of your organisation. Very, very important. You've got to know the world around you. Change is everywhere. We've got to deal with it as individuals. Look at the challenge in Japan today. The challenge they have. The changes that have come in that country overnight. And they have to deal with it. As individuals, organisations, as governments. You can't ignore change. So this leadership business is pretty hard. You've got to know yourself. You've got to know your organisation. You've got to know the world in which you operate. What's driving change in your world? Is it technology? Is it society? Is it the economy and economics? Is it the environment? Climate change? Is it political? Is it just events? The tsunami? Indonesia? Aceh? had a huge impact on the politics of Archer. Why? Because people came together. So events can have a big influence. So you've got to understand the world around you. Now, we get to the hard business. If you want to be a leader, you've got to know yourself, know your organisation, know the drivers of change. You have to be prepared to make decisions. You have to be prepared to make decisions. This is where the leadership comes in. Decisions about policies, people, priorities, programs, strategies, tactics. Every day when you're a leader, decision, decision, decision. What does that mean? Decisions carry consequences. I've never yet met a decision that doesn't have next to it another decision that could have been made instead of that decision. There's always some degree of conflict and disagreement. Now you've got to ask yourself a question. Are you better at advising or are you better at deciding? Or hopefully you're good at both. But if you're an advisor, you might not want to become a leader. You might be better advising the leader in an organisation. I know someone who was moving up the hierarchy of a public sector organisation, brilliant person. He was about to become the leader of that organisation. He'd been an acting leader, an acting head of department. And you know what he said? I don't think that job's for me. I'm really an academic. It's better for me to not be a decision maker at the top, but to study and to provide advice. I'm happier at that. And he made that decision. Now, doing extremely well and contributing to society, but it wasn't him to be a leader. It wasn't him. It wasn't inside him to make decisions and carry the consequences. You have to be prepared for conflict. As soon as you stick your hand up and become a leader, someone's going to want to knock you down. It's a sad fact of life. You've got to be prepared for that conflict. Organisations exist in political environments and are themselves political arenas. Oh, sorry, I'll go back. I've done it again. Your decisions will be contested. You've got to be prepared for that. So you can see why knowing yourself is important. You want to be a leader, but you don't cope with conflict very well. You've got to come to terms with that. Because when you take a leadership position, you're going to have to deal with conflict. So, what does all this add up to? Political judgment. Leadership's about hard skills, being tough, resolute. It's also about soft skills, being diplomatic, being able to compromise, being able to negotiate, being prepared to take a stand and to drive change on the one side, being prepared to compromise and slow things down on the other. It's about idealism and realism. Where does integrity fit into this? You know, there are some people say that leadership is a technical question. You do what you have to do in order to get the results. Well, most people actually don't live in a world where there's no ethics. Everyone has a view about what's right and what's wrong. And there's a lot of disagreement about that. But everyone has that view. So the first risk you take, if you think you can lead without integrity, the first risk you take is you will make mistakes. Because most people don't think like that. See, some leaders think they just do something, they get the result, everyone will be saying to them, isn't that good? People might say, no, I don't like the way you did that. So I can't tell you how to apply ethics in your individual situations. But I can tell you this, don't ignore ethics. If you ignore it, you do it at your own peril. Do you operate constructively or destructively? Trust is important. It gives influence and it rests upon integrity. You think about this. Think about your work and some of the people you know. If you don't trust them, they're in a weaker position than someone you trust. They want to work for you and you don't trust them. Someone else wants to work for you and you trust them. Who's got the power? Who's got the influence? The person that's trustworthy. Very, very important. There's lots of ways you can be constructive about your own position and the position of your organisation without losing your integrity. Create good impressions. Cultivate mentors. Keep your superiors informed about what's going on. Develop your favour bank. Someone asks you to do something and it's a bit inconvenient and you say, oh no, I'm not going to do that. And then one day you might want that person to help you. And if you've gone out of your way, they might be very, very favourably inclined to helping you. Isn't that simple? It's all constructive politics. Destructive politics, on the other hand, misleading people, poisoning the world, deceiving, entrapping. Now, in some situations, in some organisations, things may be so pathological that it's very difficult to avoid some of these destructive qualities. If you're in a wartime situation, people do things they don't normally do. And they say they have to do it because it's a wartime situation. Let's hope not many people have to be in that situation. But many do. But also some organisations are very, very political. And if you don't defend yourself, no one else will. So I don't say this is easy. But I just want to leave you with this thought. If you're not ethical, you take a risk. If you're not ethical, you take a risk. How to be ethical is a much harder question to answer. Because circumstances vary, situations vary. Have a story about what you're doing. A narrative for your colleagues, for your stakeholders and for the general public. Who remembers Evander Holyfield? What did he do? He was a boxer. Who did he beat? Tyson. He came from nowhere. He beat Tyson. Now, Evander Holyfield was not all that well educated. But he had a story. And at the finish of that fight, the interviewer went up to him and said, Evander, how did you win the fight? No one thought you were going to win. How did you win it? And Evander Holyfield said, I won the fight because I had the Lord Jesus on my side. And then they said, well, that's okay. We all have religion. Well, some do, some don't. But then he said, well, what about that second round? And no, I won the fight because I had God on my side. And every question they asked him, he came back with the same answer. And everyone around the world knew exactly what his story was. I only mention that because he was an ordinary person who had a story. And he got it across. How many leaders have no story to tell about what they're doing, why they're doing it, where they've come from? People are people. They like to know what's going on. They want meaning. How do you give people meaning? You tell a story. You don't make it up, but you tell a story. It's got to be based upon good evidence, but it's a story. Being able to communicate that story is crucial. I'll just quickly go through some of the advice given from very experienced Americans. Tell a story, be brief. You might have to be emotional sometimes. You might have to be unique in the way you tell your story. It's got to be relevant. I mean, some people tell stories and, someone says, what's all that about? Because they haven't thought about their audience. Finally, you want to be a leader, you've got to have space for reflection and evaluation. Some people are so caught up in what they're doing, they're tired, they're stressed, and they miss the wood for the trees. They can't see the big picture because they're not healthy. So leadership means keeping in touch, staying healthy. So this leadership business is really difficult. Let's summarise. Number 1, know yourself. Start thinking about yourself. Think about some of the decisions you've made. What do those decisions tell me? How are we going, Lynley?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. What does it mean about me? How do I cope with stress? Do I need mentors to help me, friends to help me? Secondly, know your organisation. Must know your organisation. Thirdly, know about your environment, the world you're in. Be prepared to make decisions. Now it's getting tough. You might be the person, the sort of person where decisions are hard. You find it hard. Be ready for conflict. Can't avoid it. It will happen. Develop your political judgment. There was an American general, and his staff said to him, how did you get to the top of the army? He said, I can answer that easily. I answer that with 2 words. Right decisions. And his staff said, oh, well, that's okay, but how do you make the right decision? I can answer that, he said, in 1 word. Experience. And then they said, well, how do you get experience? He said, I can answer that in 2 words. Wrong decisions. You've got to develop your political judgment. You cannot develop your political judgment without doing things and learning. Experience is so important. Unfortunately, some people make a mistake very early and never get the chance again. And that's why we always, or we should, give young people a little bit of space to be stupid. Because they all grow up eventually. Don't forget your integrity. Forget your integrity and you might undermine your person. You also might take risks that are so silly that they undermine your position. Develop a narrative and provide space for reflection. I want you to think about all of those things. It's not a technical issue. It's about you. It's not just an intellectual issue. It's about your emotions. It's not just an academic issue. It's a practical issue. And you need political judgment that you develop through experience. If you haven't got the experience, you can talk to someone that has. In your department, where you work when you go back home, talk to someone who's been there for a long time. They'll tell you how things work. Learn from it. Leadership is all about you, your personality and your presence, your values, your intellect and your knowledge, your political savvy, your speech, your health and well-being. Thank you very much.